Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Trends in Loyalty Fraud, What You Should Know. This is one of ARC's webinars in our series of our Fraud Awareness Month. So thank you for joining in with us today. We really appreciate it. Hi, I'm Judy Howard with ARC, and I have with me as well Cornelius Hadding and Doug Nass, who lead our Revenue Integrity team. So we have a lot of experience here in the room today to help answer any questions. But I'm really pleased to announce our guest presenter, who's Peter Maeder, who's the co-founder of Loyalty Fraud Prevention Association. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about Peter before I turn it over to him. He's been working in the payment card industry for over 30 years. He started his career in the car rental industry in the United States. He then subsequently moved on over to the UK, France, Switzerland, so he's moved around in Europe a bit. And then he moved on to Zurich in 1996, where he was responsible for the Visa Card Center of Swiss Bank Corporation, which is now known as UBS Card Center. Then he joined IATA in 2017 with the objective to support the airlines in all aspects of card payments, but focusing primarily on fraud prevention and the introduction of PCI and DSS. Then he went on, obviously, to be a co-founder with the Loyalty Fraud Prevention Association. So it's very exciting that we have him here this morning. It's a really interesting topic that he's going to be going over. Before I hand it over, though, I just want to do a little housekeeping. Everyone will be muted during this call, so if you want to ask questions, and we encourage those throughout the presentation, go to the side panel and you can type in your questions. We have ARC experience, we have Peter Maeder's experience. So we do have a lot of interesting, again, professional experience here in the room in the area of fraud prevention. So without further ado, Peter, I'm going to turn it over to you. And again, everyone, please ask your questions because this is the time to get your answers. Peter?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And for whatever reason, my screen doesn't move.
Just, Peter,
here we go.
There we go.
Okay. Well, good morning or good afternoon. Well, as Judy said, and thanks very much for the introduction, I'm a Swiss national, and I have been living now near Geneva for the last 10 or so years. You will obviously already have discovered that my mother tongue is not English, so please forgive me if I mispronounce certain words or are looking for words that do not spring to mind immediately. Now, as Judy said, my background is in credit cards. I set up and ran 2 Visa card centers in Switzerland before joining IATA, where I focused on fraud prevention and the implementation of the PCI standards. In 2016, I helped set up the LFPA. Now, before starting my presentation, I would like to thank ARC for the opportunity to give my view on trends in loyalty. And I obviously thank you for joining this webinar. Now, regarding questions, please keep in mind that I'm not an IT specialist. I consider myself as a facilitator who brings together the programs and providers so that together we can reduce loyalty fraud. Here you even have a picture. Sorry, should have put this up a little bit earlier. Now, here are the topics that I will cover during the presentation. First, a word about the LFPA, then a brief discussion, definition of what loyalty fraud is. The types of loyalty fraud, why is loyalty fraud on the increase, and the estimated costs of loyalty fraud, how to combat loyalty fraud, prevention is better than cure, where to find help, and then last but not least, the conclusion. Now, the LFPA, Loyalty Fraud Prevention Association, having recognized the vulnerabilities and the increasing fraud in this area, we set up the LFPA in 2016. When I say we, there are 4 people who founded the LFPA, Chris Staub and Michael Smith, who are the founders of Airline Information, who are running on a regular basis conferences on payments, on co-branding, on loyalty issues, attended particularly by airlines. Now, the objectives of the LFPA is to provide a platform to the industry and to facilitate the exchange between the among programs I'm sorry, but clearly I have a problem again with my computer. Sorry, so the objectives again, to facilitate the exchange between and among programs and the industry providers. We are working together with other organizations and above all law enforcement, in particular with Europol. Europol is the combined European police force based in The Hague in Holland. Now, the activities that we are running are organization of conferences, webinars, workshops, chat forums, etc., etc. What is loyalty fraud? So that we all talk about the same subject, let's agree on the following definitions. Loyalty programs are marketing programs to reward repeat customers, and fraud or defrauding or scamming is a crime in which someone tricks somebody else to get unfair or unlawful gain. Loyalty programs in the media, mostly, unfortunately, for the wrong reasons. So some time ago, you had Air Canada because 20,000 mobile app users were affected by a breach. Then you had Cathay Pacific, 9.4 million passengers affected. But the crooks, they do not specialize on airlines. They also attack the hotel groups, for example, Radisson. Then working and living in Switzerland these days, I was not even aware that Dunkin' Donuts had customer information. They also got visited. Eurostar is the train service. Underneath the channel between France and the UK. The channel meaning this piece of water that separates the UK from the mainland Europe. Russian hackers have started stealing frequent flyer miles. The Russians are not only involved in foreign elections, but they have discovered that there is a lot of money to be made in the loyalty industry. Back in July, BA was in the news again because of a potential fine of about $200 million. I'm sure you're aware that the EU published the GDPR, the Global Data Protection Regulations, back in 2016. Now, these regulations require that data of EU citizens must be protected. This obviously applies to companies around the world. That means that if United or Delta or American have EU-based customers, they have to protect these customers. They have to protect the data of these customers. If there's a breach, they could be fined up to 4% of their annual sales. Now, I've just read of what really had happened. BA customers, I'm reading an article from Digiday. BA customers were diverted to a false website where 500,000 consumers had their data breached. Bookings from mobile devices and through their loyalty program, Avios, were also compromised. And what is frightening, that attack lasted about 2 weeks. So a court is of the opinion that because of the breach that happened, that British Airways have to pay these fines because, according to the court, they have not secured sufficiently the data of their customers. Marriott, UK watchdog plans to fine Marriott. What happened here? Marriott had a years-long breach in their Starwood Hotels reservation system. According to Digiday, that affected 339 million people, of which 30 million in Europe, etc., etc.
Hey, Peter?
Yes?
There's a question that came in about that one from one of our customers. It said, why are breaches not discovered by these programs? Like you mentioned, Marriott's breach had been going on for over a year.
Well, that's an excellent question, and really I have to wonder why they haven't been discovered either. Clearly, the people working for IATA, for Marriott and other programs where these breaches have been going on for a long time, they either don't have the IT infrastructure or which they can consult, or they don't do their job. Meaning, you know, there are IT systems available that monitor what is happening on the websites of any company. So if they look at the website of the internet sites of these organizations, they can see that there have been attempts. Then also, you were talking about the reservation system. Clearly, if they were to check their reservation system, they must discover that something funny is going on. You cannot divert, as it said in the article, 339 million people without somebody being made aware of this. So I'm sorry, this is rather a vague answer, but you know, there are IT solutions available in the market which would allow you to prevent this sort of incident. Okay, then I have to ask the question: who is next? Who is next that gets negative media coverage? And well, as we have just discussed, please note that hacks are not discovered by the programs, but usually by account holders or third parties. Now, in loyalty, we're talking about different types of fraud. First of all, gaming. Gaming, this is defined when somebody accrues points or miles using loopholes in the terms and conditions to earn more benefits than permitted or intended. For an example, Starbucks. Apparently there was this guy who he knows that he gets a free coffee on his birthday, so he simply opened 365 accounts with Starbucks, got a free coffee every day. Toys R Us, well, unfortunately, they are no longer among us, but Toys R Us, they used to give a present to a child on his or her birthday. So parents, they changed the birthdays. The question, obviously, is this fraud? Remember the definition. Fraud is a crime in which someone tricks somebody else to get unfair or unlawful gain. So that was gaming. Next category is brokering. Brokering is the buying and selling of miles or reward tickets in conflict with the program terms and conditions. Some people have accumulated so many points, either legally or through whatever tricks, that they decide to monetize them. Now, there are specialist websites where points can be bought and sold. Again, the question, is it fraud? Loyalty programs were set up to reward repeat customers and surely not for points to be brokered. Then employee or third-party fraud. This is the unauthorized accrual or redemption by employees of travel agents, hotel franchises, reservation systems. Now, free flights, stays in five-star hotels obviously is very attractive. So unfortunately, there are some employees of these organizations that can't resist the temptation and credit points or miles to their own account or to accounts of friends rather than to the customer. Now, a major hotel chain also reported that they have discovered that franchise operators fiddle with the occupancy rates. You have to know that franchise operators, they get more money for a reward stay if they have high or full occupancy in their hotels. Hey, Peter, criminals are also using stolen credit card data to purchase points, which they then transfer to other accounts so that they can use them without knowing the program, what has happened. Friendly fraud. Now, I understand that you are coming from the airline industry, so you're familiar with double dipping. Double dipping, a passenger who is a member of 2 different loyalty programs claims miles from both of them. Now, if you need advice on double dipping or triple dipping, consult the internet. You will find you'll find answers to whatever question that you have. Merchants, they also are confronted with dishonest customers. You know, they make purchases to earn points and then return the goods. And most of the time, the points are not being canceled. Now, this type of fraud reminds me also of the story that I was told by a person working in an airline. They had realized that every time a certain passenger traveled, there was a baggage claim. But what can you do about it? You can't prove that he was cheating. Then account takeover, or ATO. This is clearly the costliest type of fraud. Criminals are particularly interested in ATO, or account compromise, for two reasons: the points or miles and the customer data. Both commodities can be sold on the darknet for significant profit. More on that later. Here are some means and methods that criminals use to achieve their objectives. They develop malware, that is software to cause damage, phishing, email spoofing, creating accounts with false identity, taking over accounts, and then brute force attacks using bots. Bots, the definition is a network of private computers infected with malicious software controlled as a group without the owner's knowledge. For example, to send spam messages or to distribute malicious software. Here is how a botnet works. You have on number one, the criminal infects your computer with malware. Then number two, the criminal sends attack orders to his own server on the bottom of the page on the left-hand side, criminally controlled servers. The infected computers, they receive then the orders from the criminal server to start, number four, the attacks on the target. Data breaches. Data breaches are attacks, dedicated attacks, constantly probing the system for any weakness. One airline program found that there were 26 different ways into their system. For example, microsites that IT was only vaguely aware of. So data breaches are attacks on an industrial scale. And you have to keep in mind that the criminal society is very well organized and they help one another. For example, you can rent a botnet for just $2 an hour, or you can buy capture workarounds at $1.39 for 1,000 application. And underneath, I just added, beware of the latest trends, manipulated web app applications. But I will refer to that a little bit later. Now, why the increasing threat of loyalty fraud? Credit card organizations here in Europe, they have reported to Europol at the recent meeting that they see a reduction in credit card fraud in the airline. It is my belief that criminals have realized that credit card fraud is becoming more difficult. You are already obliged to introduce these PCI DSS standards. Even in the US, you start introducing chip and PIN. You're aware of 3D Secure. And then above all, I believe that the collaboration between the card schemes, the industry, and law enforcement is resulting in a reduction in credit card fraud. I mentioned here Europol, GAAP. That stands for Global Airline Action Days. On certain days when this campaign is decided to take place, airlines will not cancel what they know are fraudulent transactions. They send the data of these transactions, of these reservations, to Europol, and Europol, they disseminate this information to participating airports and airlines and police forces, where the police interviews the, inserted commas, customer is being interviewed. Whenever these action days are taking place, there are dozens and dozens of arrests on the spot, but not because of credit card fraud, but because of much more serious crimes, such as money laundering, smuggling, human being trafficking, etc., etc. So Europol, they have extended this activity now on a worldwide basis, and I know that the US Secret Service and the FBI are also participating in these actions. So credit card fraud in the airline industry in Europe is on the decline. However, there are rich pickings available in the loyalty area. And I have to say that programs are not well protected. Many programs still use legacy system. There's a conflict between marketing and fraud prevention. For example, I have an account with a large airline here in Europe. I access this account by only keying in my 4-digit password. Now, with the software that is available in the market, criminals can break this security within seconds. And last but not least, unfortunately, the account holders, they don't consider the real value of points and miles. It is not cash. So accounts are not checked as often that they should be.
Peter, there is a question that came in regards to that. There is a question that came in regards to what you're just talking about, because there is value to all of that. The question is, what can a cardholder do to protect his account? And you're probably going to get to that, I'm assuming, in some of the slides. But that's a question that people are concerned about.
Okay, well, I mean, what the cardholder can do is, first of all, he should check his account on a regular basis. And obviously, as I mentioned, I have a 4-digit password, but this password I can also change. It is recommended that all passwords are being changed at least every quarter. So, but I will come to that in a minute, but it's a very good question. And above all, again, the programs should also force the account holder to be more careful with his account. So again, points, miles are not a currency. Is this correct? Loyalty programs, again, they were created as a marketing tool to reward loyalty, to reward repeat customers. They are based on points and miles schemes with originally no monetary value. However, in 2011, the accounting requirements in the United States changed, which means that the issued but not yet redeemed points or miles have to be reported in the books as a liability. As a result of these changes, the programs have to entice the account holder to spend his points as quickly as possible. So programs make redemption much more attractive. Points and miles can be used for all sorts of purchases, also in other industries. For example, airline miles can be used to book a hotel stay, for a car rental, and also to purchase gift cards, in particular e-gift cards. Now, these miles can easily be monetized. That means as good as cash. And as mentioned before, loyalty programs provide a commodity to criminals that they are very much interested in, customer data. Now, loyalty fraud has been around since the programs began. It is easy, there are great benefits, it doesn't require special skills, and training is available for free. You can go onto the internet and Google training to hack loyalty accounts. You will come up with some results. And unfortunately, the consequences, if you're being caught for the time being, they're limited. Talking with Europol, I learned that they started to focus on loyalty fraud only recently. In the past, it was just a financial crime. They have now concluded that there is much more behind stealing points or miles. More on that later. Loyalty programs, a booming industry. I've indicated the source for this data on the slide. So 68% of millennials, they demand a good loyalty program if they are to be brand loyal. And good means also secure. Already now, there are more than 3 billion loyalty program memberships in the US alone. And that's to grow to 4.6 billion. Loyalty programs, a booming industry. To my knowledge, there is no confirmed or official data of the total value of all points or miles that are carried as liability in the books of airlines or hotels, etc. But according to industry experts, that means managers of programs, providers, etc., the value is estimated at about $238 billion in liability for the US alone. We can probably double this figure for all programs on a worldwide basis. And then the estimated fraud losses. Again, there are no official numbers available. Industry experts believe that the losses are about 1% of the value of all the accounts. But on top of these fraud losses, of these TAS losses, there are significant additional costs. The cost of the investigation, the customer lifetime value loss, I will refer to that in a minute, the GDPR fines. Remember British Airways, $200+ million fined, Marriott, over $100 million fined, and then the reputational damage. The reputational damage to your organization, I'll discuss in a minute. The negative customers experience impact to your business. At the recent LFBA conference, Connections Loyalty presented the findings of a survey. According to this, 26% of the interviewed people, they would cancel their rewards program membership if they got hacked. 86% claim that reading negative reviews of a business impacts their buying decision. 17% would stop doing business. And 37% would tell others. Can you imagine the snowball effect that the breach of large numbers of accounts will have to your reputation? How much is a loyal customer worth to your business? According to the White House Office of Consumer Affairs, the average loyalty customer is worth 10 times his first purchase, meaning his lifetime value is 10 times the value of the initial purchase, and that it is 6 to 7 times more expensive to acquire a new customer over the cost of keeping a current one. Fraud is a business. Organized crime is involved and is earning a lot of money. They use modern technology maliciously to breach data centers, and they use the dark web to monetize the fruits of their criminal activities. Here is a slide that was provided by Forgenics, an IT security company. They searched the internet some time ago and found the following prices for data that is offered for sale on the internet, or rather the dark web. A social security number goes for $1. Subscription services for $1 to $10, etc. Look at credit card or debit card numbers. They're starting at $5, and loyalty accounts, they already cost $20, but still that's cheap if you're getting a lot of points or miles. Fraudsters prey on vulnerability. This is data from a study done by Deloitte and a publication called Entrepreneur. The studies may be somewhat out of date, but I'm convinced that nothing has changed. 50% of consumers use the same passwords across other accounts. Only 21% change their password every quarter. 47% use passwords that are 5 years or older. Now let me ask you, are you changing your passwords regularly? I'm sure that you have been asked the question, which is the most used password? Yes, indeed it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or the word password. Fraudsters prey on vulnerability. Here are again some statistics from a survey done by Connections Loyalty. 34% of account holders log into points accounts no more than once every few months. 10% never access their balance. 23% check at least once a month. Fraudsters. Now, next time you go through an airport, look for discarded boarding passes. They contain interesting customer information. Here I have Carlos Ortiz, and I've also got his frequent traveler number with, I believe it's British Airways. Now, I have to ask you, how secure is my account if I only need a 4-digit password to access it? A word about redemption. What do criminals do with all the stolen points or miles that they have accumulated? Well, as mentioned, they can sell them on the internet. It's called brokering. They can transfer points or miles to another account. They purchase non-traceable goods. They have a good time. They love to travel or stay in fancy hotels. And as indicated, they can purchase gift cards, and increasingly electronic gift cards. Those are available immediately. There's no shipping address. Therefore, they can't be traced. Other criminals use points and miles for illicit activities, smuggling, trafficking. And I know that Europol, they have a special unit based in The Hague in Holland, who is trying to track down the gangs that are forcing women to prostitute themselves in airport hotels. Now, the hotel rooms, they're being paid for by stolen points or miles. And obviously you're familiar with the sale of cheap tickets or hotels room through faked travel agents. Now, here's an example. Look at this site. Looks great, doesn't it? But it's this in IATA accredited site, a travel agency. They accept Visa or MasterCard or PayPal. But once you booked your flight and want to pay, the Visa connection doesn't work, and you are asked to wire the money through Western Union or bank transfer. Now, a friend of mine, he managed to get this site taken down. Well, 2 weeks afterwards, it was up again. They had only changed the name. Look on the top left-hand side. Now it's called the Cheap Trip Agency. They took it down. Your Trip Planners. It went on. My Trip Friends. Your Trip Guides. Your Trip Chart. And so it went on and on. Now, let's discuss of how to combat fraud. The challenge obviously is to provide the customer with a frictionless experience if he accesses his account. But his account also must be protected so that his points and his data are secure. I would encourage you to follow up on this slide and the questions that are listed on this slide. Can your fraud management tools and processes protect your customer data and your reputation? Is your level of control enough to monitor suspicious account activity? Are you screening transactions that both earn and redeem loyalty points? How quickly, that's very important, how quickly can you adapt to new fraud threats without the risk of losing loyal customers? There is no silver bullet. This is a slide that CyberSource used during a conference in Brighton in the UK. CyberSource asked merchants which types of fraud they have experienced. ATO, account takeover, ranked among the top 3 types of fraud. However, only 39% of merchants had tools in place to monitor account takeover. How to combat loyalty fraud? Here are just some pointers of how I would go about when asked how to combat loyalty fraud. First of all, I believe that the cost of loyalty fraud is underestimated or not taken seriously. Fraud will happen. Remember, fraud will happen. So first of all, companies, programs have to provide the fraud department with adequate resources, be it human and also IT support. Use rule-based detections as well as machine learning, artificial intelligence tools. Most important, know your customer. Account monitoring, unusual behavior, change of contact details, unusual point of acquiring and redemption patterns. All this has to be monitored, and there are tools available in the market that would help the fraud team detect this sort of behavior. Number of logging attempts. After 3 or say maybe 5 logging attempts and with a password that doesn't work, the account should still be put on hold for the time being. Then the customer has to be educated. The customer has to be part of the team that is protecting the account security. The customer must accept that certain security measures must be put in place. I'm thinking of multi-factor authentication, but obviously these days you have fingerprint tools available that can read the fingerprint, etc. And last but not least, be prepared. Develop and test recovery plans, and also a media plan. Because if fraud happens, you should go to the media and admit that you have been hacked and that measures are being taken to correct the situation. Lots of companies that we have been talking to, they are completely unaware that what to do if a breach has happened. So besides the more technical tools or means, a lot of common sense has to be used to prevent fraud. In the introduction of my presentation, I mentioned that one of our objectives is to provide a platform for programs and providers to meet and exchange. Here is an overview of the type of companies that attended and the topics that they have covered in recent LFBA conferences. For example, Kobe, they focused on program design. Again, program design to avoid that the terms and conditions of a program can be abused. Sion, know your customer. They're working with artificial intelligence to get your customer. For example, by sending a search onto Google to find out whether the customer has other accounts in the social media, which obviously gives them much more security about working with this particular person. For Genix, penetration testing, vulnerability testing, pin drop, call center fraud. Call center fraud, again, your call centers, they're very much exposed. Pin drop has solutions that help you protect them. Richter, dark web activities. Then Lookout, they have solutions to protect mobile applications and malware. I have a slide on that a little bit later. Then Connections Loyalty. I have shown slides from them on 2 or 3 occasions. They have loyalty fraud prevention solutions. SIFT, a leading organization in machine learning, artificial intelligence. Count, again, loyalty fraud prevention systems. CyberSource, CyberSource, they're well known in the credit card world, but they have also moved and developed solutions to prevent account takeover in the loyalty area. And last but not least, IBM, Trusteer, or iOvation, who both have excellent fraud detection solutions. Now, before closing, a slide discussed by Lookout, as I mentioned, about the latest trend in loyalty fraud. Criminals have started to attack mobile apps with malware through your client's mobile devices. You can see the trend on this slide. And most disturbing, according to Lookout, most IT and security teams have no visibility on these threats and how to mitigate them. And I was just reading that iOvation, they reported that 49% of risky transactions now come from mobile devices. North America leads in this with 59%, with mobile transactions up. Fraudsters are more and more targeting this media. Now, I don't want to discourage you, but in closing, here is the opinion of security experts about the future. Cybersecurity experts across the globe agree that data breaches are inevitable and that every company is at risk. The number of breaches continues to grow. Look at the growth of breaches recorded between 2017 and 2018. And mind you, I'm certain that a lot of breaches, they have not been reported to the media. Some facts. Only 3% of breaches were secure breaches. That means where encryption was used and the stolen data was rendered useless. The most popular dark web browser is used by over 2 million people every day. The largest single dark web file identified contained over 1.4 billion records, including emails and passwords, and it's available for free for the criminals. A real long-term impact to customers. Breached customers are up to 8 times more likely to be victims of identity fraud. And the disturbing statistic, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
interject. There is a question because you did just mention these obviously have a huge value with the points and the miles, and obviously in personal data is attached to that. And you mentioned that the media doesn't really report out on this. And the question is from our customer is, why isn't this been taken, more seriously, and why don't they report out on this type of fraud more?
An excellent question. Well, difficult answer. Ask the Marriotts, ask the BAs, ask the banks. I mean, I understand there was a breach at the bank recently, but obviously, as a brand, you don't want to go to the media and say, "Look, I've been breached," because I have shown you that statistically, if a program has been breached, customers, they are hesitant to continue. So again, with a proper media plan, I believe that a company can prevent harm to their reputation by going out to the media upfront and say, "Look, I'm sorry, dear customer, we have had a problem, we got breached, but this is what we're going to do." But they're trying to hide them. And so for that reason, we're not talking so much about these data breaches. Sorry.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Good. That's a good topic for sure.
Okay, then again, just the last sentence here. A research done in 2017 shows that the level of fraud on data that is 2 to 6 years old has increased by nearly 400% over the last 4 years. Why is that? Criminals are sitting on the stolen data. They're merging the data that they're stealing at the different locations, different places, and they wait for the right opportunity to act. Now, keep in mind, loyalty programs have been and are being set up to reward loyal customers. So let me ask you, what are you doing to protect their integrity? This is my last slide. Takeaways. Loyalty is big business. Fraud is here to stay. And I, in particular, like the takeaway that Kevin Lee of SIFT used to close his presentation. He said, "Trust is earned in drops, but lost in buckets." So this is the end of my presentation. Judy, are there more questions?
Yeah, there's a couple more that have come in, and this I think you may have mentioned in a previous slide, but this one is where can someone get help? Like, what do they do? If you were head of a fraud department, what are the next steps that you would undertake? How can we help our customers kind of understand this better, to have better awareness, to have prevention?
Well, I'm sorry, I have to make a little bit of publicity for ourselves. The Loyalty Fraud Prevention Association was set up to provide a platform for programs to talk with one another. That means, we are running on a monthly basis, for the time being, free webinars where we discuss subjects that we feel are of interest to loyalty programs, or also, for example, I think it was maybe 1.5 years ago that a hotel chain asked us, we have heard about this GDPR, what is this? So we got in touch with a specialist law firm here in Europe, and they put together a presentation to answer all questions on GDPR that our members had. So again, where to get advice? Well, first of all, as I said, the LFPA, we run free webinars. We are, I was going to mention, we are running our next conference in Tampa, Florida, end of October. I believe it would be a nice time to do a little trip to sunny Florida. I don't know, your choice. Then obviously I have indicated in some of the slides names of companies who we believe are really leading organizations in providing tools and also advice in preventing loyalty fraud. Obviously, we will never stop loyalty fraud, but we have to bring it down to an acceptable level.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. There are a couple more questions here. Peter. This one is, this session touched on online fraud. However, how can corporate loyalty fraud related to travel agencies be identified and controlled?
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
Yep, I sure can. It says, you touched on online frauds. However, how can corporate loyalty fraud related to a travel agency be identified and controlled?
Well, when I was working with IATA, we simply had to go back to where the fraud had happened. I mean, with the credit cards, we had the chargebacks, so it was easy. But we see in loyalty fraud, we also see there must be a source. And so if certain fraudulent activities can be detected coming all from the same source, the same travel agent, I believe we have to talk to those people. It's man to man, you know, dear Mr. Travel Agent, what is happening there?
Hey, Peter, this is Doug. And we do see some of the loyalty fraud when it's associated with bank programs. And what's really interesting in some of our research is we can come in and see what we view as a traditional credit card fraud ticket issued on a Monday. For whatever reason, the fraud attempt is identified by the travel agency, so they void the ticket. We watch for that passenger. The next day, they might have a bank loyalty fraud ticket. So we see the ability of the fraudster to switch back and forth between loyalty fraud and traditional credit card fraud, and we can follow that through our systems.
Thank you very much, Doug.
Yeah, it just shows how versatile some of the fraudsters are.
Absolutely, but you just indicated, you know, we have the technical component, your systems which discover this, and obviously the human element. You need the two.
Exactly.
And then loyalty is exactly the same. You know, I've indicated on a number of times machine learning, artificial intelligence. I mean, these new systems, they can go through tons and tons of data which a human wouldn't be able to do. They identify a certain number of cases that have to be looked into by a human being. But again, it's a collaboration, IT, systems, and the humans in the fraud department. And I must mention one thing. I was talking to a lady a few months ago. She's working for a billion OTA based somewhere in the USA. I asked her, how big is your fraud department? And she said, you're looking at it. So this was this one person in a OTA that does more than $1 billion worth of revenue. I leave it up to you to judge whether this is sufficient.
Wow. Okay, there's a few more questions that have come in. This one is, I've done some reading about deep fake, which is voice fraud. What can we do to prevent that? It seems like it's a new technology that there doesn't seem to be a lot of options for prevention. Is that something that you can talk about?
Well, again, you know, I hope you can see a pin drop. They are focusing on call center fraud. So this is, you know, talk to pin drop. If you can't find the address of these people, if you pass me the information of your customer, I'll certainly be able to help. And they are the specialists on call center fraud, and they will be able to help.
Okay, great. And there was a question for you to show this slide again, so thank you, Peter, for going back to that. The other is, do you know what is the global % of fraud versus sale? So I'm assuming of all the sales, is there a percentage?
I'm sorry, I don't have this number. I mean, we compared, and I have shown that earlier, that, well, it is a guesstimate that the value of all the points and miles in loyalty accounts in the US alone is roughly $240 billion. And, you know, again, these are guesstimates. 1%, we expect that about 1% of these loyalty account points ended up being stolen. So,
Peter, Peter, that's loyalty. The value to that loyalty is for all types of loyalty programs. So it's not just air. It's retail. It's everybody, hotels, everybody who has a program for loyalty.
Absolutely.
That is that value, right?
Yes. 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 Yes.
Thank you, Peter and Cornelius. Here's another one. Are there any trends that you've noticed specifically with travel destinations?
Frankly, no. We have not been looking into this. No. But you know, again, going back to my years at IATA, I must tell you, I was attending a conference in Miami, and well, there was a lottery. You could win a prize, and the first prize was a flight from New York to Lagos. The winner wasn't really pleased.
Oh boy. I have one more question as of now, unless we do have a few minutes if anyone wants to send some more in. This one is, you had mentioned something about the GDPR and potential fines in Europe. Should people try to get their legislators involved?
Well, it is my honest opinion that yes, indeed. You know, again, fortunately in the European Union, they got their act together. They developed this GDPR, and there are fines for companies who do not properly protect the customer data. Because obviously, you know, the inconvenience that is happening to the customer if his data is being stolen, and then, you know, other accounts getting hacked because passwords are not very efficient in some cases, as I mentioned with my 4-digit password for an airline account with about 400,000 miles on it. So yes, the legislator has to get involved in this. They have to, as in Europe, well, develop some requirements that programs have to do. But I would go a step further. You know, all over the world, we have these so-called data protection laws. Now, I don't want to be unkind, but you can also call them criminal protection laws. For example, in Europe, the European airlines, they got together years ago and developed what is called now Perseus. You might have heard of this organization, which is Perseus enables the exchange of data that have been used for fraudulent credit card transactions in the airline industry. Well, some countries, not to name them, France, for example, they can't participate because their local laws doesn't allow them to exchange data that provenly has been used for a fraudulent transaction. So, you know, yes, indeed, in my opinion, the legislator has to be involved. They must allow honest organizations to exchange data to prevent fraud. It's crazy. You know, the criminal society, they work together on the dark web. You know, I understand it's quite difficult to penetrate the dark web, but if you're in there, you know, you can deal with miles and points. You can deal with data. You can get help, etc., etc. So the crooks, they work together, and we, the people who are honest, we are prevented by some of these laws. So the legislator, yes, they should step in. They should allow collaboration among organizations on a worldwide basis. That's my opinion.
No, thank you, Peter. Here's another question that's just come in. Are you looking into airline employee travel fraud on my ID travel or employee passes?
Well, again, you know, we are the the facilitator for programs to meet or with providers. So no, we haven't gotten involved in this sort of topic. But again, if this organization is that asked the question is interested, we can certainly organize a discussion on this with members, with airlines, with hotels, etc. They are interested in talking about on this subject. You know, again, the role of the Loyalty Fraud Prevention Association is to provide a platform for programs and providers to talk with one another. That's it.
No, great. And this has been a lot of really helpful information and important information that you've shared here this afternoon, Peter. There's one more question, and then we'll kind of wrap this up. We have a few minutes left. This question is, and I know you had mentioned that there was an OTA with maybe one person looking at fraud in their company. So this question is, where should a fraud department sit in the hierarchy of an organization?
Excellent question. And you know, I would add here, I know of a number of airlines, for example, who have not one, but 3 different fraud departments. They have a fraud department for credit cards, one for loyalty, and the third one for baggage. Now, in my opinion, these 3 departments, they all have the same customer. So as a first step, I would also try to combine these fraud departments, have them work together, have them talk with one another. Now, where to put a fraud department in the hierarchy? First of all, the fraud department must have visibility at the highest level of an organization. As I've indicated before, fraud has to be taken more seriously than it has been in the past. So where do you put it? Internal audit, finance, why not? But somebody high up in the hierarchy who has access to the CEO. For example, I remember when I was at IATA, talking to the person responsible for the introduction of the PCI standards within British Airways. Well, I know that PCI was discussed at some of the top management meetings. That's where fraud should be discussed as well at the highest level, because, well, again, IATA experience where some airlines, they experienced the 2% fraud on their revenue. Now, obviously, 2%, that's the difference between profit and loss, right? So again, if you have $100 million worth of points or miles in your accounts, and if you lose 1% of them, 1 million more or less, I mean, for some company, it's worthwhile discussing this issue. Judy? Okay,
great. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you very much. It looks like one more question popped in. And then we'll definitely wrap it up. We have like just 2 minutes. Apart from credit card, loyalty programs, and baggage, is there any other area an airline should look into for fraud?
Well, I'm not an airline specialist. So, you know, my background is credit cards. I run a credit card center. And well, at IATA, I was focusing on credit cards. So I'm sorry, but, you know, I know, for example, that in Europe, at least, a lot of the airlines, they no longer take cash for duty-free sales on their flights in Europe. Because, well, sometimes there was a little discrepancy between the merchandise sold and the amount in the till. So, but this is just a small point. But I think by focusing on credit card, loyalty, and baggage, you should be able to see improvements in the, reduction in the fraud levels. But there's another point. You know, how many organizations are really clearly identifying the losses that they incur as a result of fraud? I can then name now of this airline because they don't exist anymore, unfortunately. Air Berlin. I had good contacts with them. Now, the fraud department I asked them, what's your chargeback rate? They said, I'm sorry, we don't see chargebacks because those are handled by the finance department. It was just a booking item. So, you know, again, give the fraud department the tools that they need in order to work.
Great, that's really good information, Peter, and I'm going to kind of wrap it up here, but I really want to give you a really gracious thank you for taking the time to join us today. This has been a lot of really, really good information. I also want to thank my colleagues, Doug Nass and Cornelius Hatting, who also were sitting in here with me today. I want to just give you some important information of contact information here at ARC before we leave the call. There is our ARC hotline for fraud that if you suspect or think about that, it is 855-358-0393. That's an important number to have, or you can email stopfraud@arccorp.com, or you can always contact Cornelius or Doug, and I'll kind of run through these fast, but if you need these, you do have my contact information at jhoward.com. But Cornelius is C as in Charlie Hatting, Hattingh at arccorp.com, and Doug is D Nass, Nass, at arccorp.com. And they are here to help in any way possible. So if you do suspect fraud, have any questions, let them know. And then real quickly, we have two other in our webinar series coming up for airlines. We have webinars on September 25th. That is fraud in the travel sector, insights from law enforcement and cyber forensics. And then on Thursday, September 26th, mapping the underground economy, the Fellowship of Card Shops. So again, hope you can join us on those. Thank you everyone for joining us on the call today. We really appreciate it. Peter, thanks again, and Doug. Until next time. Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.